What happens when a 5-year-old child, alone and afraid, decides to call emergency services for help? This is the dilemma that Catherine faces in her life, marked by neglect and terror. Her story begins in a small apartment where the echo of children's laughter is quickly replaced by screams and the indifference of adults who should protect her. Amidst this emotional storm, Catherine finds herself trapped in a world that is not only hostile but also filled with dark secrets that shape her destiny. Catherine is a girl with big, curious eyes who, despite her tender age, already carries a weight that many adults do not know. She lives in a house where love is scarce and pain is abundant. Waking up on any given day, she looks around, peeling walls, broken toys scattered on the floor, and the constant absence of a warm embrace. Little Catherine dreams of having a family that loves and protects her, but reality is cruel and often leaves her hopeless. With each passing day, she feels more invisible, as if no one hears her, until one day, in a moment of desperation, she decides that she needs to do something. The 911 phone number becomes her only ally. With trembling hands, she dials the number, her small, insecure voice asking for help, revealing the dark truth of her life. This call is a silent scream, an act of courage that propels her on her journey. However, the response she receives is only the beginning of a whirlwind of emotions and rejections. With each attempt to seek support, Catherine encounters the indifference of people who should be her protectors, making her question whether there is truly a safe place in the world. In her solitary walk, Catherine finds small moments of kindness that ignite a light of hope in her heart. A stranger who smiles at her on the street, a teacher who notices her and encourages her to draw, and even a neighbor who brings her a snack. These interactions, although brief, become essential for her not to give up on dreaming of a better future. Each gesture of kindness is like a drop of water in a desert, reviving her soul and reminding her that there is still goodness in this world. As the story unfolds, Catherine begins to uncover family secrets that bind her to a painful past. She realizes that to find her place in the world, she needs to confront the demons that haunt her. The search for acceptance and identity intertwines with her memories, revealing a cycle of pain that the family cannot break. Catherine becomes a warrior, fighting not only for herself but also for the truth that will set her free. Catherine's journey is filled with challenges, but it is also a story of resilience. Each failure turns into an opportunity for a new beginning, and each rejection is a reminder that she is stronger than she thinks. Catherine learns that although the path is arduous, the pursuit of love and understanding is worthwhile. Amidst tears and laughter, she discovers that true strength lies in her ability to love, even when life has taught her to be suspicious. In the end, Catherine not only faces her fears but also finds unexpected allies who help her rewrite her story. The relationship she develops with those around her transforms her and shapes her worldview. The kindness she encounters along the way becomes her beacon, guiding her toward a future where, finally, she can be who she truly is. In her quest for acceptance, Catherine becomes a voice for other children who, like her, are struggling to be heard. And so her story becomes a testament to hope and renewal. Catherine was sitting on the cold floor of her apartment with her legs crossed and her head down, thinking about everything that had happened. The echo of her parents' screams still resonated in her mind, and the image of them caught up in a fierce fight made her feel a knot in her stomach. It was as if that feeling of helplessness followed her, and the idea that there was no escape from that reality left her anguished. The little girl wanted to scream. She wanted someone to hear her, but she didn't know how. When she decided to call emergency services, Catherine hoped that the voice on the other side of the phone would be a relief, an answer to her silent cry. However, the conversation was not what she expected. The operator, although kind, seemed confused and hesitant. Catherine, with a trembling voice, explained the situation, but the feeling of being ignored overtook her. The question that lingered in her mind was, what if no one comes to help me? This doubt made her feel even more alone. In the days that followed the call, Catherine felt like a shadow. At school, her classmates played, laughed, and shared secrets while she remained on the sidelines, observing. A teacher, Mrs. Mendez, noticed the sadness in the girl's eyes and decided to approach her. "Catherine, you seem distant. Is everything okay?" The teacher's soft voice was like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day, but Catherine hesitated. The fear of opening up prevented her from accepting that gesture of kindness. "I'm fine," she replied, although the truth was very different. The teacher, however, was not fooled. Over time, Mrs. Mendez began to create a safe space for Catherine. She encouraged the girl to draw, to express her feelings through art. However, each time Catherine picked up a pencil, the emotions that arose were intense and conflicting. She wanted to draw something beautiful, but her mind was filled with dark images of her life. The vibrant colors on her palette blended with the gray of the pain she carried. Meanwhile, at home, the situation worsened. The fights between her parents became more frequent and more intense. Catherine wondered if it was her fault, if her presence was a burden. This uncertainty left her distressed. She felt trapped in an endless cycle of worry and sadness. It was as if she were in a bubble, watching everything from the outside, unable to intervene. On a particularly difficult day, after a night of screaming and slamming doors, Catherine decided to go out to play in the park. It was a place she loved, where she could watch children running and laughing, and for a few moments forget her own pain. While she was there, she met a boy named Lucas. He had a big smile and bright eyes, and he always seemed eager to play. Lucas was excited about a game of ball and invited Catherine to join him. "Come on, Catherine, it's so much fun," he exclaimed, holding the ball. The invitation was tempting, but doubt soon took hold of her. What if she wasn't good enough? What if he rejected her? The fear of exposing herself to new people kept her from accepting. "I don't know how to play very well," she said, shrugging her shoulders. "No problem. Let's learn together," Lucas replied, his voice full of enthusiasm. Catherine hesitated, but the joy on his face was contagious. With a small burst of courage, she accepted the invitation and joined him. As they played, Catherine began to feel a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Laughter and play surrounded her like a warm blanket, and for a brief moment, the pain in her heart seemed to lessen. However, even in that moment of happiness, the shadow of her life at home was always present. After a fun afternoon when she got home, silence enveloped her. The sound of shouting still echoed in her mind, and the feeling that Lucas couldn't understand her reality made her feel isolated again. She wondered if she could really open up to him, if she could share the fears that accompanied her. At school, Mrs. Mendez noticed the change in Catherine's behavior, but she also saw the marks of sadness in her eyes. In a moment of vulnerability, the teacher asked, "Catherine, you know you can trust me, right? I'm here to listen to you." Catherine felt a tightness in her heart. The teacher's words were an invitation, but insecurity kept her at a distance. The fear of being judged and, even more, of being left behind, paralyzed her. As the days passed, Catherine found herself in an internal dilemma. She wanted to open up, but the idea of telling her story made her feel fragile. The struggle between the need to be heard and the fear of showing vulnerability became increasingly intense. In moments of loneliness, she wondered, what if no one really cares? This doubt made her feel like a burden, and the idea of seeking help became more distant. Her friendship with Lucas began to bring a new light to her life, but Catherine still couldn't break free from the ties that bound her to the past. She often thought that even with a friend by her side, the emptiness in her home and the pain in her heart were obstacles that seemed insurmountable. This uncertainty made her question her own ability to change her life. And in the meantime, the shadow of fear continued to follow her. Catherine's internal struggle was just the beginning of her journey. With each new challenge, she found herself closer to confronting her demons, but also more uncertain about what that would mean for her future. The desire to be accepted and loved became a flame burning in her heart, but doubt and fear of failure were the chains that held her back. And so, little Catherine continued her search for a safe place, a place where she could truly be herself. Catherine was in a state of deep confusion. After the fun afternoon in the park with Lucas, which seemed to have brought a little light to her life, the darkness at home enveloped her again with full force. The silence that awaited her was deafening, and the memories of her parents' fights echoed in her mind like a scratched record. The laughter that still danced in her ears soon became a distant echo. The joy she had felt for a few moments seemed to have been ripped away from her, leaving only emptiness. At school, Catherine tried to focus on her classes, but her mind wandered. Although Lucas had become an important friend, she couldn't help but feel like a stranger. The conversations between them were filled with laughter, but there was always a boundary she hesitated to cross. The fear of opening her heart and talking about the pain that consumed her kept her in a constant state of alert. The idea that Lucas might look at her with pity, or worse yet, pull away, terrified her. One morning, while drawing in art class, Mrs. Mendez approached her again. "Catherine, are you feeling okay? Your drawing is a bit darker than usual." The teacher's words hit Catherine like an arrow. She looked at the paper, where dark scribbles mixed together, reflecting the storm brewing inside her. The teacher was right, but how could she explain what was going on? How could she put into words the pain that consumed her? "I'm fine, teacher. I'm just thinking about some things." Catherine forced a smile, but she knew it wasn't convincing. Mrs. Mendez didn't seem satisfied with the answer, and Catherine felt a chill in her stomach. She was sure the teacher wanted to help, but the fear of being seen as a victim kept her from opening up. Days passed, and Catherine felt increasingly isolated. Lucas tried to include her in his games, but there was an invisible wall between them. She found herself lost in her own doubts, questioning whether she would ever be truly happy. The friendship that was emerging between them was like a flower growing in arid soil. Beautiful, yet still with little chance of fully blooming. At home, the situation with her parents was becoming increasingly unbearable. The fights escalated to the point where Catherine felt like she was living in a constant storm. One night, while hiding in her room, she heard her father scream words she had never imagined hearing. He seemed so different, so distant from the man she once knew. Catherine's heart ached and tears slid down her face. She felt powerless and alone, as if she were trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. In that moment of despair, she decided she needed to vent. Gathering her courage, Catherine wrote a letter to Lucas, expressing her deepest feelings. It was an act of vulnerability that made her anxious. What if he didn't understand? What would happen if he didn't want to be her friend anymore? Doubt consumed her, but the need to be heard was stronger. The next morning, Catherine handed the letter to Lucas, her heart pounding. He read it in silence, and his eyes filled with understanding. "Catherine, I'm here for you. I never thought you were going through this," he said, his voice full of empathy. That response gave her a momentary sense of relief, but soon the doubt returned. What if Lucas saw her as a burden? Their friendship began to deepen, but not without challenges. Lucas, realizing Catherine's pain, started to worry excessively about her. He tried to protect her from everything, which began to create conflicts. One afternoon, while they were playing in the park, Lucas got frustrated because he couldn't make Catherine laugh. "You need to try to have more fun. I can't be the only one wanting you to be happy." His words, though well-intentioned, hit her like a punch to the stomach. Catherine felt guilty, as if she were dragging Lucas into her own darkness. "I don't want you to worry about me. It's not fair," she replied, her eyes brimming with tears. The tension between them was palpable. Lucas, surprised and hurt, stepped back. Catherine felt the world collapsing around her. It was as if she had once again let something valuable slip away. The following days were difficult. Catherine felt guilty for having hurt Lucas, but at the same time, the internal struggle intensified. She questioned whether she was truly worthy of love and friendship. The weight of her emotions crushed her, and she wondered if she would ever overcome her insecurities. Finally, the next day, Catherine decided to go to Lucas's house. Her heart raced, and anxiety almost made her give up, but she knew she had to try. Upon arriving, she took a deep breath and knocked on the door. When Lucas answered, his expression was a mix of surprise and concern. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she began, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to push you away, but I don't know how to deal with all of this." Lucas looked at her for a moment, and then, with a gentle smile, said, "We can handle this together. You don't have to face it alone." His words were like a light in the darkness. Catherine felt a wave of hope swell in her chest. Their friendship was going through a test, but she finally felt she could trust Lucas. Catherine realized that there was still much to be done. The internal struggle continued. The wounds didn't heal overnight, but she was willing to try. With each small step, she began to understand that although pain was a part of her life, friendship and courage could help her overcome it. And so, with Lucas by her side, Catherine prepared to face the challenges that still lay ahead, determined to find the light in the darkness. Catherine took a deep breath, her heart racing, as she waited for Lucas to open the door. Anxiety consumed her, and doubt whispered in her mind. What if he didn't want to be her friend anymore? What if everything had changed forever? But seeing Lucas's face, a mix of surprise and concern, she felt she needed to take the risk. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to push you away, but I don't know how to deal with all of this." The sincerity in her words was laden with fear and hope. She felt like she was on a tightrope, about to fall into an abyss of loneliness and uncertainty. Lucas looked at her for a moment that felt like eternity. He had the expression of someone trying to understand not only what had happened, but also what was at stake. "Catherine, we can handle this together," he replied, with a gentle smile that lit up his face. "You don't have to face this alone." Those words were like balm for the pain that had settled in her chest. How could she be light and fun when the storm inside her seemed to grow? "I don't want to be a weight," she murmured, the vulnerability in her voice almost making her cry again. "I feel like I'm always dragging you into my darkness." The weight of her emotions was a burden that felt impossible to carry. She was so caught up in the idea that her pain could push away the people she loved that she could barely see the light Lucas offered. "Don't think like that," Lucas replied, now more serious. Catherine felt a wave of relief and hope bloom within her. Just 2 days ago, she had felt alone and surrounded by darkness, but now, with Lucas by her side, life felt a bit more bearable. However, the internal battle continued. She knew she had hurt Lucas. His frustrated look was still etched in her mind, like a stain she couldn't erase. "You need to try to have more fun." He hadn't said that with bad intentions, but at that moment, Catherine had felt like a burden to him. Friendship means being there for each other, even in tough times. "I want to be here for you, no matter what happens." His words created a small space of comfort amidst the emotional turmoil Catherine was facing. But doubt still lingered. What if Lucas was just saying this to avoid hurting her more? What if, deep down, he didn't want to be there? But what if I can't change? What if I keep bringing you down? Insecurity showed in her voice, and she felt the anxiety rising again. The idea that she could lose Lucas terrified her. He was the only person who could make the light seem a little closer, but she didn't want to be the reason he felt bad. Lucas took a deep breath, as if weighing his words. "Catherine, we all have tough moments. We all have our own battles. What matters is that when one of us falls, the other is there to help lift them up." He stepped closer, and Catherine saw sincerity in his eyes. "I'm not perfect. I have my own struggles too. But that doesn't mean I don't want to be your friend. You are important to me." These words were a turning point for Catherine. She realized that friendship wasn't just about happiness and good times, but also about support and understanding during difficult moments. That revelation made her question her beliefs about herself and what it meant to be a friend. She didn't need to carry the weight of her emotions alone. It was time to face her pain and, more importantly, to allow someone to be by her side. Catherine looked at Lucas, and a new determination started to grow within her. "I want to try," she said, her voice more steady. "I want to be honest with you and with myself. I can't promise it will be easy, but I'm willing to face it." In that moment, she felt she had taken an important step. Lucas smiled, and the tension in the air seemed to dissipate. "That's all I ask. Let's do this together." The connection between them strengthened, as if a new layer of understanding had been added to the friendship that already existed. Catherine felt that she finally had someone willing to share the weight of her struggle. In the days that followed, Catherine began to open up more. She shared not only her pains, but also her small victories. With each conversation, each outpouring, she felt the walls she had built around her beginning to crumble. Lucas became her ally, and together they faced the challenges of adolescence and life. However, Catherine's journey was far from linear. There were days when the darkness seemed to return, and the internal struggles surged with full force. But instead of closing off, she remembered Lucas's words and the promise she had made to herself. Whenever doubt crept in, she would stop and think, "I am not alone." Slowly, Catherine realized that although her emotions were still intense and challenging, friendship and courage helped her navigate those turbulent waters. She began to understand that it wasn't the pain that defined her, but how she chose to deal with that pain. With each small step, Catherine began to rebuild herself, not just as a friend, but as a person who deserved to be loved and happy, even in the midst of darkness. And so, with Lucas by her side, she was ready to face the challenges and uncertainties still to come, determined to find the light amidst the darkness step by step. Catherine sat in her room. The walls that once felt so safe now seemed oppressive. The conversation with Lucas had been a turning point, but the journey they were about to embark on wouldn't be simple. The weight of emotions, which she thought she might have started to control, still followed her like a shadow. It was as if with every step she took toward the light, a new doubt emerged to pull her back into the darkness. She looked out the window, the sunlight filtering through the clouds, and remembered the promise she had made. I will try. But what did that really mean? How could she be true to Lucas if inside her the storm still raged? Catherine felt torn between hope and fear. What would happen if she failed? What if, even with the intention of being honest, she ended up pushing Lucas away for good? At school, things were different. Catherine began to open up to her classmates, but each interaction was a minefield of insecurities. One moment she was laughing with a friend, and the next she found herself paralyzed by memories of past moments when she felt inadequate. The inner voice that criticized her was always there, whispering that she wasn't good enough to be happy. One time, during recess, while talking to Lucas, he noticed the change in her behavior. "Catherine, are you okay?" He looked at her, concerned, and she felt that the question went beyond the physical. He wanted to know if the storm inside her had subsided. "I'm trying," she replied, forcing a smile. But the truth was, inside, she was still struggling. Each day was a new battle, and while she wanted to believe she was rebuilding herself, the cracks were still visible. "You know you can count on me, right?" Lucas insisted. "Sometimes just talking about it helps." His willingness to listen confused her. How could he be so understanding while she felt so lost? "It's just, I don't want to be a burden to you," she admitted, looking down. Vulnerability left her exposed, but there was something liberating about being honest about her weaknesses. Lucas sighed, as if he were thinking deeply. "Catherine, you will never be a burden to me. We all have our battles. I also have days when I feel lost. What matters is that we're in this together." Those words resonated with Catherine. She began to realize that friendship wasn't just about happy moments, but also about sharing the struggles. This made her feel a little lighter, but doubt still consumed her. In the following days, Catherine tried to apply this new perspective to her life. She began to open up a bit more, not just with Lucas, but with other friends as well. However, insecurity was never far away. One time, while talking with a friend about a school project, Catherine hesitated to share her ideas, fearing they would be better or more interesting than hers. The critical voice in her head was back. "What if they don't like it? What if you mess up?" By the end of the conversation, frustration took over her. She felt like she was missing opportunities to truly connect with people. That night, alone in her room, Catherine reflected on what was holding her back from fully opening up. It was the fear of failure, of judgment, of rejection. She remembered Lucas's words, "We're in this together." But even so, the idea of failing felt more real than ever. Over the weeks, Lucas became a pillar of support. He encouraged her to participate in activities that had previously intimidated her. But in a moment of vulnerability, he also shared his own struggles with Catherine. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough in math. I just don't want to disappoint anyone," he confessed, and Catherine was surprised. He, who seemed so confident, also struggled with his insecurities. This sharing brought them even closer. Catherine realized that everyone had their flaws and fears, and that didn't make them any less worthy of love or friendship. Mutual understanding became a foundation for them, but still, Catherine's internal battle continued. One day, she decided she needed to confront some of her insecurities head-on. During a group meeting at school, when the teacher asked each person to share their ideas on a project, Catherine felt her heart race. The internal voice warned her, but in a moment of courage, she raised her hand and spoke. Her words came out hesitantly, but she felt lighter by the end. To her surprise, her classmates listened attentively, and even Lucas smiled at her, encouraging her. The feeling of having expressed herself was liberating, but as soon as the meeting ended, doubt returned. What if I don't do a good job? What if they don't like my ideas? Catherine felt as if she were on an emotional roller coaster. In the following days, she and Lucas continued to support each other. He was always there, ready to listen, and that helped her feel a little more secure in her own skin. But even with that support, the consequences of her emotional struggles began to manifest in the relationships around her. Catherine noticed that her friendship with some classmates was changing. They seemed more distant, and that made her insecure. "Do you think they are upset with me?" Catherine asked Lucas, with a lump in her throat. "I feel like I'm not connecting with them like I used to." "Maybe they don't know how to deal with what you're going through," Lucas replied. "But that doesn't mean they don't care. Sometimes people need time to understand what's happening with others." Those words made her reflect. She realized that the change didn't only affect her, but also the people around her. Her struggle might be creating a gap between them, but that didn't mean she had to fight alone. She decided that instead of shutting down, she would try to open up to her friends and explain what was happening. In a candid conversation, Catherine managed to express her insecurities and asked for support. Their reaction was warm and understanding, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she wasn't alone in this journey. Over time, Catherine began to realize that although the internal battle had no end, she was learning to live with her uncertainties. Each step she took brought her a little closer to the light. She still had difficult days, but now she knew she didn't have to face them alone. With Lucas by her side and new connections forming, Catherine began to understand that friendship and vulnerability were the keys to overcoming. And so, life went on, filled with ups and downs, but now with the certainty that there was support and love around her. Catherine sat in her room. The walls that once felt so safe now felt oppressive. But what did that really mean? How could she be true to Lucas if within her the storm still raged? Catherine felt torn between hope and fear. What would happen if she failed? And if, even with the intention of being honest, she ended up pushing Lucas away for good? At school, things were different. Catherine began to open up to her classmates, but each interaction was a minefield of insecurities. The conversation with Lucas had been a turning point, but the journey they were both about to embark on wouldn't be simple. The weight of emotions, which she thought she might have started to control, still followed her like a shadow. It was as if, with each step she took toward the light, a new doubt arose to pull her back into darkness. She looked out the window, the sunlight filtering through the clouds, and remembered the promise she had made. "I will try." One moment she was laughing with a friend, and the next she found herself paralyzed by memories of past moments when she felt inadequate. The internal voice that criticized her was always there, whispering that she wasn't good enough to be happy. Once, during recess while talking with Lucas, he noticed the change in her behavior. "Catherine, are you okay?" He looked at her, concerned, and she felt that the question went beyond the physical. He wanted to know if the storm inside her had subsided. "I'm trying," she replied, forcing a smile. But the truth was, inside, she was still struggling. Every day was a new battle, and while she wanted to believe she was rebuilding herself, the cracks were still visible. Lucas insisted, "You know you can count on me, right?" Sometimes just talking about it helps. His willingness to listen left her confused. How could he be so understanding while she felt so lost? "It's just, I don't want to be a burden to you," she admitted, looking down. The vulnerability left her exposed, but there was something liberating about being honest about her weaknesses. Lucas sighed as if he was thinking deeply. "Catherine, you will never be a burden to me. We all have our battles. I also have days when I feel lost. What matters is that we're in this together." Those words resonated with Catherine. She began to realize that friendship wasn't just based on happy moments, but also on sharing struggles. This made her feel a little lighter, but doubt still consumed her. In the following days, Catherine tried to apply this new perspective to her life. She started to open up a bit more, not just with Lucas, but with other friends as well. However, insecurity was never far away. Once, while talking with a friend about a school project, Catherine hesitated to share her ideas, fearing they would be better or more interesting than her own. The critical voice in her head was back. What if they don't like it? What if you mess up? By the end of the conversation, frustration overwhelmed her. She felt like she was missing opportunities to truly connect with people. That night, alone in her room, Catherine reflected on what was holding her back from fully opening up. It was the fear of failure, of judgment, of rejection. She remembered Lucas's words, "We're in this together." But even so, the idea of failing seemed more real than ever. Time passed, and Lucas became a pillar of support. He encouraged her to participate in activities that had previously intimidated her. But in a moment of vulnerability, he also shared his own struggles with Catherine. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough at math. What if I don't do a good job? What if they don't like my ideas?" Catherine felt like she was on an emotional roller coaster. In the following days, she and Lucas continued to support each other. He was always there, ready to listen, which helped her feel a little more secure in her own skin. But even with that support, the consequences of her emotional struggles began to manifest in her relationships around her. Catherine noticed that her friendship with some classmates was changing. "I just don't want to let anyone down," he confessed, and Catherine was surprised. He, who seemed so confident, also struggled with his insecurities. This sharing brought them even closer. Catherine realized that everyone had their flaws and fears, and that didn't make them any less worthy of love or friendship. Mutual understanding became a foundation for them, but still, Catherine's internal battle continued. One day, she decided she needed to face some of her insecurities head-on. During a group meeting at school, when the teacher asked everyone to share their ideas about a project, Catherine felt her heart race. The internal voice warned her, but in a moment of courage, she raised her hand and spoke. Her words came out hesitantly, but she felt lighter by the end. To her surprise, her classmates listened attentively, and even Lucas smiled at her, encouraging her. The feeling of having expressed herself was liberating, but as soon as the meeting ended, doubt returned. They seemed more distant, and this made her insecure. "Do you think they are upset with me?" Catherine asked Lucas with a knot in her throat. "I feel like I'm not connecting with them like before." "Maybe they don't know how to deal with what you're going through," Lucas replied. "But that doesn't mean they don't care. Sometimes people need time to understand what's happening with others." Those words made her reflect. She realized that the change didn't just affect her, but also the people around her. Her struggle might be creating a space between them, but that didn't mean she had to fight alone. Determined to open up, Catherine called her friends for a conversation. With her heart racing, she explained her insecurities and asked for support. Their reaction was warm and understanding, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she wasn't alone on this journey. Over time, Catherine began to realize that although the internal battle had no end, she was learning to live with her uncertainties. Every step she took brought her a little closer to the light. She still had difficult days, but now she knew she didn't have to face them alone. With Lucas by her side and new connections forming, Catherine began to understand that friendship and vulnerability were the keys to overcoming. And so, life went on, full of ups and downs, but now with the certainty that there was support and love around her. Catherine was nervous. The day of the school event had arrived and anxiety consumed her. She had decided to sign up for a project presentation that involved a topic she was passionate about, but that also terrified her. It would be the first time she spoke in front of an audience, and the thought of exposing her ideas and being evaluated left her in a state of panic. As she prepared, the memory of the conversations she had with Lucas encouraged her. He always said it was normal to be scared, but that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to face it. That idea echoed in her mind, but doubt still haunted her. What if I fail? What if I forget everything I practiced? Catherine's heart was pounding, and she felt a knot in her throat. When she arrived at the auditorium, the bright lights dazzled her. The place was filled with students, teachers, and parents. Nervousness enveloped her like a heavy cloak. Looking at the audience, she felt small and insignificant. For a moment, she wanted to give up. But next to her was Lucas, who gave her an encouraging look. He smiled, and that made her feel a thread of hope. "You can do it," he murmured, and she took a deep breath, trying to convince herself that he was right. But while waiting for her turn to present, the inner voice that criticized her began to scream. "You are not good enough. Look at all those faces. They are going to laugh at you." Catherine closed her eyes, trying to push away the negativity. When her moment finally arrived, she stood up, her heart racing. The first word came out hesitantly, but as she spoke about the project, something unexpected happened. She began to feel the passion for the topic growing inside her. The words started to flow, and the audience listened in silence. However, when she reached the crucial point of her presentation, something made her hesitate. A memory of a past failure hit her like a punch in the stomach. When she was 10 years old, she had given a presentation that did not go as she had hoped, and the laughter of her classmates still echoed in her mind. Catherine felt the heat rise to her face, and insecurity threatened to take her down. What if today is the same? What if I fail again? The passion she felt faded, and doubt took over. She stopped, her gaze lost in the void, and the silence of the audience became deafening. In that moment of weakness, Catherine saw Lucas's face in the crowd. He was watching her intently, with an expression that mixed concern and support. That connection brought her back to reality. She remembered the conversation they had when he said that everyone has their struggles. He had his fears too, but he was there to support her. And so Catherine decided that she would not let fear overcome her again. She took a deep breath, trying to dissipate the storm inside her. With a new focus, she began to speak again. This time, it was not just about the project, but about what it meant to her. She shared her experiences, her struggles, and the importance of facing fears. Every word that came out of her mouth seemed to lift a weight off her shoulders. Catherine noticed that the audience was responding. She saw faces nodding in agreement, eyes shining with empathy. They were no longer strangers and critics, but people who, like her, had their own insecurities and battles. The energy in the air changed, and the tension that surrounded her began to dissipate. When she reached the end of her presentation, Catherine felt exhausted, but also accomplished. The audience applauded, and she smiled, feeling a wave of relief and pride. "I did it," she thought, as her gaze met Lucas's, who was smiling widely. The connection between them solidified in that moment. She was not alone. They were together on this journey. After the presentation, as the students dispersed, some classmates came over to congratulate her. Catherine felt her heart warm. She had overcome one of her greatest fears and, in doing so, realized that the connections she had formed were more important than her insecurities. It was not just about succeeding, it was about being honest with herself and with others. That night, in her room, Catherine reflected on what had happened. She realized that true overcoming was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. She had faced her insecurities, and by opening up, she discovered an inner strength she did not know she had. The lessons she learned became beacons on her journey, guiding her through emotional storms. Catherine understood that vulnerability did not make her weak, but rather stronger. The friendship she cultivated and the support she received from Lucas and her classmates helped her see that everyone struggles, and that by opening up to others, she was also helping to create a space of understanding and empathy. With a smile on her lips, Catherine decided she was ready to face new challenges. The road ahead would still have its ups and downs, but now she knew she had the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what storms arose. The light she sought was within her, and the journey of self-discovery was just beginning. Catherine sat on her bed, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the presentation. The soft light of the lamp illuminated her room, creating a cozy atmosphere where she could finally relax and reflect on everything that had happened. The echo of applause still resonated in her mind, but now, instead of anxiety, she felt a mix of relief and gratitude. The presentation had been a turning point. For Catherine, it was not just about sharing her project, but about confronting her fears and insecurities. As she looked out the window at the stars shining in the sky, she remembered how small and insignificant she had felt moments before she spoke. But now, with the experience fresh in her memory, she realized there was something powerful about opening up to others. The vulnerability that had once seemed terrifying now made her feel stronger. With a slight smile on her lips, Catherine picked up her journal and began to write. She wanted to record not only what she had learned, but also how the people around her had influenced her journey. Lucas, in particular, had been a pillar of support. He had always believed in her, even when she doubted herself. His words of encouragement echoed in her mind. Courage is facing fear. Catherine understood that his friendship not only helped her overcome that moment, but also taught her the importance of having people by your side during difficult times. At school, things changed a bit for Catherine. Her classmates began to see her in a new light. She was no longer just the shy girl who avoided the spotlight. Now she was someone who had the courage to expose herself and share her passion. Some female students approached her to congratulate her, and Catherine realized that by opening up, she had created a space for connection that hadn't existed before. They also had their insecurities, and her courage inspired them to talk about their own struggles. Catherine remembered how she felt when she watched other presentations. Each of the speakers brought their stories, and she had always admired that courage. Now, she had become one of them. This new understanding of life and the people around her made her realize that everyone faces challenges, and that makes them more human. The conversations she had with her classmates, now more open and sincere, helped her build deeper friendships based on empathy and understanding. However, not everything was perfect. Catherine still struggled with the fear of failure. She knew that the journey to self-confidence was not linear. There were days when she felt insecure, but now she had tools to deal with those feelings. Instead of succumbing to anxiety, she began using deep breathing and positive visualization that Lucas had taught her. These practices became part of her routine before any stressful situation. One night, while studying for a test, she decided to call Lucas. The conversation flowed naturally, and she couldn't help but share how much their friendship meant to her. "You don't know how much your words helped me," said Catherine, her voice full of gratitude. "I really feel like I achieved something incredible because of your support." Lucas laughed, a contagious sound that brightened the conversation. "I just encouraged you to do what you were already capable of, Catherine. You've always had that strength inside you. You just needed to believe." These words stuck in Catherine's mind. She began to understand that true success was not just about overcoming challenges, but about recognizing the strength she already had within herself. This led her to be kinder to herself. Now, when she failed at something, instead of criticizing herself, she remembered what she had learned and how much she had grown. Over time, Catherine became a reference for other students who, like her, struggled with shyness and insecurity. She began to get involved in support groups at school, helping others overcome their fears. What had once been a burden for her had now transformed into a mission. She wanted others to know they were not alone and that vulnerability was an important part of everyone's journey. Catherine's life was changing in ways she had never imagined. The friendships she cultivated became deeper and more meaningful. Each interaction was marked by a new understanding and empathy, making her feel more connected to the world around her. She realized that all the challenges she had faced had made her stronger, more resilient, and more open to new experiences. As she reflected on her journey, Catherine understood that her story was just the beginning. The presentation in the auditorium was not the end, but a step toward a more authentic and courageous life. She no longer saw fear as an enemy, but as a sign that she was venturing outside her comfort zone. And with each step she took, she felt the strength of her achievements, both small and large, shaping who she was. Life would continue to present challenges, but now, armed with the wisdom she had gained and the support of friends, Catherine was ready to face them. The horizon ahead was filled with possibilities, and she was determined to explore each one, knowing that the journey would be as valuable as the destination. Catherine looked out the window, observing the twinkling stars in the dark sky, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, she had found herself trapped in her own shyness, unable to share her ideas and feelings. Now, reflecting on the journey she had taken, she realized that she had transformed into someone she never imagined she would be. That presentation, which had initially seemed a terrifying moment, had become the catalyst for a new life, full of opportunities and meaningful connections. The changes in her life went beyond just gaining confidence. Catherine had become a beacon of hope for many classmates. She became involved in support groups at school where she shared her story and offered words of encouragement to those going through similar difficulties. Each time a student approached her with insecurities, she remembered her own struggle and how vulnerability had brought her closer to others. The empathy she cultivated made her realize that although everyone had their battles, they were all seeking a safe space to be heard and understood. Lucas, her friend and constant support, was also impacted by Catherine's change. He not only saw his friend flourish, but also learned from her the importance of being an active listener and a present friend. Together, they created a youth group that promoted open conversations about fears and insecurities. What started as a small meeting after school quickly transformed into a space where many felt safe to express their feelings. Their friendship was no longer just about mutual support, but about building a community where everyone felt valued. Catherine also began to realize that true success was not necessarily linked to external accomplishments, like grades or awards. It was a deeper feeling, an internal satisfaction that came from being authentic with herself and with others. Over time, she learned to value small victories, like the simple act of being honest about her emotions or helping a classmate feel more secure in their own skin. These achievements, though modest, had a lasting impact on the way she viewed the world. As Catherine progressed on her journey, she allowed herself to explore new interests and passions. The fear of failure was still there, but now it was accompanied by a new perspective. Every little mistake became a learning opportunity. Classmates who had once been shy and insecure now felt more confident to express themselves. Her story inspired others to share their own struggles, and the school became a more welcoming space where everyone felt part of something bigger. Catherine understood that life was a series of ups and downs, and that each experience, whether positive or negative, contributed to the person she had become. The lessons she learned about courage, friendship, and self-acceptance shaped her worldview. She signed up for activities she had previously considered impossible, like theatre and creative writing, and with each new experience, she felt more alive. Failures were no longer a sign of weakness, but a natural part of the growth process. Years had passed since that transformative presentation, and Catherine was now about to graduate. Looking back, she saw not only her evolution, but also the impact her journey had on the people around her. She now knew that true wealth would not be measured in material possessions, but in the quality of the relationships she cultivated and the strength she found within herself. Now, at her graduation, Catherine was surrounded by friends who had supported her along the way. That room, filled with laughter and celebration, was a reflection of everything she had been through. She felt at peace, surrounded by people who accepted her as she was. Looking to the future, Catherine felt excited and ready to face the new challenges that would come. The horizon was still filled with uncertainties, but she knew she could count not only on herself, but also on a network of friends who would support her. Catherine smiled as she realized that although her journey was far from over, she had found a new purpose. It was more than just overcoming her limitations. It was about inspiring others to do the same. And so, with a heart full of hope and an open mind to possibilities, she was ready to write the next chapter of her life, knowing that each step taken brought her a little further, not only in her own journey, but also in the journey of those she touched along the way. Catherine sat in her place, surrounded by friends, as the graduation ceremony progressed. Listening to the principal's speech, she couldn't help but reflect on everything she had experienced. Each word resonated with her own journey of transformation and overcoming. She remembered her insecurities, the moments she hesitated to express herself, and how all of that felt so distant now. She had become a version of herself she had never dreamed of being, and that realization brought a genuine smile to her face. Looking at Lucas, who was beside her, Catherine felt warmth in her heart. He had supported her every step of the way, and their friendship had become one of the pillars of her new life. Lucas, noticing her gaze, smiled back and whispered, "Look at all these achievements. It's amazing to see how far we've come." His words touched her deeply. It was as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. That genuine connection was a powerful reminder that, even in adversity, they had found a path together. At the end of the ceremony, as the graduates stood up, Catherine felt an urge to share her reflections. "Lucas," she began, "do you remember when everything seemed so daunting? I never imagined I would have the courage to open up or lead a group. Now I can hardly believe how much this has changed me." Lucas nodded, his eyes shining with pride. "It was an incredible journey, Kath. You not only found yourself, but helped many others find themselves too." Catherine smiled and looked at the group of friends who had gathered around her. "Each of us has our struggles, right? But when we find a safe space to talk about it, everything changes. I've learned that we are not alone. Her words echoed among those present, and a respectful silence settled as everyone reflected on their own experiences. She continued, "True success isn't just about external achievements, like grades or awards. It's about being true to yourself and to others. It's about creating bonds and building a community where everyone feels valued. I wouldn't trade that feeling for anything." The group began to nod, agreeing, and a sense of unity filled the air. With graduation as a milestone, Catherine knew her journey was just beginning. She felt stronger, more confident, and more prepared to face the challenges ahead. Life would still bring ups and downs, but now she was certain she could count on her friends, and more importantly, on herself. "Life is a constant learning experience," she reflected aloud. "And every mistake we make is just a disguised opportunity. We grow when we can look at our failures and learn from them." Lucas looked at her with admiration. "And you do that so well, Catherine. You are an inspiration." His compliment filled her heart with gratitude. "I just hope we can continue to inspire each other," she replied. "We need to remember that no matter what life throws at us, we have ourselves and each other." The ceremony ended and the graduates headed to the celebration, but Catherine knew the true festivities were just beginning. It was a celebration of friendship, overcoming challenges, and the journey that everyone was about to continue. As she laughed and danced with friends, it was impossible not to feel that every step taken had brought her to this moment. And looking toward the future, Catherine saw a path filled with possibilities. With a heart full of hope and renewed determination, she was ready to write the next chapter of her life. Every challenge, every achievement, and every friendship would become part of her story. And as she said goodbye to that phase of her life, Catherine made a promise to herself. She would continue to be a beacon of hope, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. After all, true wealth lies in the relationships we build and the courage we find within ourselves. And so as night fell and the stars shone in the sky, Catherine made one last silent wish: that all those who feel lost or insecure may find their way, just as she found hers. If you are also going through a journey of self-discovery, remember, do not be afraid to open up, to share your struggles, and to seek support. Every step counts. Now it's your turn to shine and inspire others. Share your experiences, and together, let's build a more welcoming world. You are not alone, and your story may be the light someone needs.